The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Buckingham Palace as Margaret Fletcher adjusted her reading glasses and reviewed the inventory list for the third time that week. As the palace's senior archivist, she had spent nearly 30 years cataloging the royal family's vast collection of historical garments, jewels, and artifacts. Every piece had a story, and Margaret knew most of them by heart, but today felt different. The palace administrators had requested a complete audit of all coronation regalia following the recent state ceremony. It was standard procedure after any major royal event, yet something nagged at Margaret's conscience. During her preliminary checks, she had noticed discrepancies in the storage records. Small things at first. A velvet cape listed in Cabinet 12 that she could have sworn belonged in Cabinet 9, a set of ceremonial gloves whose documentation seemed oddly incomplete. The most troubling discovery had come late yesterday afternoon. Margaret had been cross-referencing photographs from the late Queen's coronation ceremony with the current storage manifests when she realized something extraordinary. The Queen's coronation dress, that magnificent ivory silk Norman Hartnell creation embroidered with the emblems of the United Kingdom and Commonwealth, was not where it should be. According to every official record, the dress had been carefully preserved in the Royal Collection's climate-controlled vault. Margaret had personally overseen its placement there after the funeral. She remembered that day vividly, the weight of history in her hands as she had gently folded the precious fabric, the smell of old silk and dried flowers, the reverence in the room as staff members had bowed their heads in silent tribute. Yet when she had checked the vault yesterday, the specially designed storage box sat empty except for its tissue paper lining. Margaret's hands had trembled as she lifted the lid. She checked the label twice, then 3 times. This was definitely the correct container, but the dress was gone, vanished without explanation, without authorization, without any record of its removal in the logbooks that were supposed to document every single item that left or entered the vault. Margaret had spent the entire evening reviewing security logs and movement records. Nothing. It was as if the dress had simply ceased to exist on paper. Though she knew with absolute certainty that it had been there just 3 weeks ago during her last routine inspection, she had not slept well. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. How could something so precious, so historically significant, disappear from one of the most secure buildings in the world? Now, sitting in her small office surrounded by leather-bound catalogs and dusty filing cabinets, Margaret faced an impossible choice. She could report the missing dress immediately, triggering what would undoubtedly become a massive investigation. Security would be questioned, procedures scrutinized, reputations damaged, or she could continue searching quietly, hoping to find a reasonable explanation before creating panic throughout the palace. Her telephone rang, startling her from these troubling thoughts. It was James Worthington from Palace Security. His voice carried an unusual tension. "Margaret, we need you down in the West Wing immediately. There has been a development you need to see." "We have found something." Margaret's heart raced as she grabbed her identification badge and hurried toward the corridor. Whatever James had discovered, his tone suggested it was serious. Very serious indeed. As she walked briskly through the palace's ornate hallways, Margaret's mind spun with possibilities. Had they found the dress? Had someone come forward with information? Or was this about something else entirely? The West Wing housed various apartments and private quarters. Why would security need an archivist there? The questions multiplied with each step. Behind her, the palace continued its daily rhythm, unaware that something precious from its past had gone missing, setting events in motion that would soon shake the very foundations of the royal household. James Worthington stood waiting outside a heavy oak door, his expression grave. 2 other security officers flanked him, their postures rigid with professional concern. Margaret noticed immediately that this was not standard protocol. When palace security assembled in numbers like this, something significant had occurred. James gestured for her to follow him inside, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper as they entered what appeared to be a sitting room. "This is one of the private apartments," James explained, though Margaret already recognized the location. "What you are about to see must remain absolutely confidential until we understand the full situation." Margaret nodded, her professional training overriding her growing anxiety. She had worked with sensitive materials for decades. Discretion was not merely expected but essential in her position. Whatever lay beyond that sitting room door, She was prepared to handle it with appropriate gravity. James led her through the sitting room into a bedroom suite. The furnishings were elegant but personal, clearly belonging to someone who lived here rather than a museum display. Margaret recognized certain decorative elements, family photographs on side tables, personal books on shelves. This was not a guest room or ceremonial space. This was someone's private living quarters. The realization sent a chill down her spine. Why had security brought her to such an intimate location? "We conducted a routine security sweep this morning," James continued, his voice measured and careful. "Standard procedure following any major royal event. We check all apartments systematically, looking for any security concerns or irregularities. During our inspection here, one of our officers noticed something unusual in the wardrobe." He paused, seeming to choose his words with extraordinary care. "Something that should not be here, something that belongs to the Crown's historical collection." Margaret's breath caught in her throat. "The coronation dress. It was here." James nodded slowly, confirming her unspoken question. He walked to a large wardrobe and carefully opened its doors. Inside, among contemporary clothing and modern garments, hung an unmistakable creation of ivory silk. Even in the dim light of the wardrobe's interior, the elaborate embroidery gleamed. The emblems of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, the symbols of Commonwealth nations, the intricate needlework that had taken months to complete decades ago. Margaret felt her knees weaken slightly. She steadied herself against a nearby chair. The dress appeared to be in perfect condition, carefully hung on a padded hanger protected by a fabric cover. Someone had taken considerable care with it. This was not vandalism or theft for profit. This was something else entirely. Someone had deliberately removed a priceless historical artifact from secure storage and placed it here, in a private wardrobe, as if it were simply another piece of personal clothing. "Whose apartment is this?" Margaret asked quietly, though part of her already suspected the answer. James exchanged glances with his colleagues before responding. "This suite belongs to Queen Camilla, her personal quarters." The words hung in the air between them. Margaret's mind raced through implications and possibilities. How had the late Queen's coronation dress ended up in the current Queen Consort's private closet? Who had moved it? When had it been transferred? And most importantly, why? The situation was delicate beyond measure. They were standing in the Queen Consort's private bedroom, examining what appeared to be an unauthorized possession of Crown property. The political and personal ramifications were staggering. Margaret understood immediately why James had insisted on such strict confidentiality. This was not merely an inventory error or storage mistake. This was a matter that could damage reputations, create scandal, and potentially embarrass the royal family at a time when public opinion remained crucial to the monarchy's standing. "We need your expert verification," James said formally. "Can you confirm this is indeed the late Queen's coronation dress?" Margaret stepped closer, her professional instincts taking over despite her emotional turmoil. She examined the fabric, the stitching, the distinctive embroidery patterns. She looked for the specific details she knew by heart from years of documentation. The tiny imperfection in the hem where a thread had caught during the ceremony. The subtle variation in one emblem's coloring. The particular weight and texture of the silk. "Yes," she confirmed quietly. "This is authentic. This is the coronation dress. The real one." Within hours, a small crisis management team assembled in one of the palace's secure conference rooms. The group was deliberately limited to essential personnel only. Margaret sat at the long table beside James Worthington and 3 senior palace administrators. Also present was Dame Patricia Blackwood, the Lord Chamberlain's deputy, whose responsibilities included oversight of royal protocol and household management. The atmosphere was tense, professional, and charged with unspoken concerns about the implications of their discovery. Dame Patricia spoke first, her voice calm but firm. "Let us establish the facts clearly before we proceed with any course of action. Miss Fletcher, please confirm for the record what you discovered during your inventory audit." Margaret recounted her findings methodically. The missing dress from the vault, the empty storage container, the absence of any transfer documentation, the security sweep that had located the dress in Queen Camilla's private wardrobe. Her testimony was precise, factual, devoid of speculation or judgment. Dame Patricia listened without interruption, taking occasional notes on a leather-bound pad. When Margaret finished, there was a moment of heavy silence. Then Dame Patricia addressed the group. We must consider several possibilities. First, that Her Majesty requested the dress for personal reasons, and standard protocol was not followed. Second, that someone transferred the dress without proper authorization. Third, that this represents a more serious breach of security and protocol. Each scenario requires different responses and carries different implications. One of the administrators, a thin man named Robert Chen who oversaw household logistics, cleared his throat nervously. With respect, Dame Patricia, we must also consider how this appears. The late Queen's coronation dress found in the current Queen Consort's private possession. The optics are extraordinarily difficult regardless of the explanation. The public perception, should this become known, would be devastating. There are already those who question Her Majesty's position. This could fuel tremendous controversy. Dame Patricia's expression hardened slightly. Mr. Chen, we will not proceed based on public relations concerns. We will proceed based on facts and proper protocol. Our duty is to the institution and to the truth. However, she continued more gently, you are correct that we must handle this with exceptional care. Margaret Fletcher has maintained absolute professional standards throughout her career. We must do the same. The priority is understanding what happened and ensuring it does not happen again. James Worthington consulted his tablet computer, pulling up security logs. I have reviewed all access records for the vault over the past 6 months. There are only 3 occasions when the storage area containing the coronation dress was accessed. 2 were scheduled maintenance inspections conducted by Miss Fletcher herself. The 3rd was an unscheduled entry 3 weeks ago. The authorization came from the Royal Household Office, citing preservation consultation. No specific item was listed in the access request. Who authorized that access? Dame Patricia asked sharply. James scrolled through the digital records. The signature belongs to Lady Sarah Thornton. She serves as one of Queen Camilla's ladies-in-waiting. The revelation sent a ripple of understanding through the room. A lady-in-waiting would have both the authority to make such requests and the access to the Queen Consort's private apartments. But why would she remove a historical artifact without proper documentation? What possible legitimate reason could justify such irregular procedure? Dame Patricia made a decision. We must speak with Lady Sarah immediately, discreetly and privately. Miss Fletcher, I will need you to prepare a detailed report on the dress's condition and any evidence of how it has been stored since removal from the vault. Mr. Worthington, please compile all relevant security footage and access logs. This investigation proceeds with absolute confidentiality. Nothing leaves this room. We owe Her Majesty the courtesy of understanding the full situation before drawing conclusions. As the meeting concluded, Margaret remained seated for a moment, processing everything. She had spent 3 decades preserving history, maintaining the continuity between past and present that gave the monarchy its weight and significance. Now she found herself at the center of a situation that threatened to create exactly the kind of scandal that could damage that carefully maintained continuity. Whatever the explanation, whatever the truth behind the coronation dress's mysterious journey from vault to wardrobe, the coming days would test everyone involved in ways they had never anticipated. Lady Sarah Thornton arrived at Dame Patricia's office precisely on time, her demeanor composed but clearly puzzled by the urgent summons. At 63 years old, Sarah had served the royal family for nearly 2 decades, first as a lady-in-waiting to Princess Anne, and more recently, in the same capacity for Queen Camilla. Her reputation was impeccable, her discretion legendary. Margaret watched from her seat as Dame Patricia gestured for Sarah to sit, noting the older woman's steady hands and direct gaze. Whatever her involvement, Sarah showed no obvious signs of guilt or nervousness. Dame Patricia wasted no time on pleasantries. Lady Sarah, we need to discuss an access authorization you signed 3 weeks ago for the Royal Collection Vault. The preservation consultation request. Sarah's expression remained neutral, though her eyes showed a flicker of something, recognition perhaps, or concern. Yes, she said simply. I remember the request. It came directly from Her Majesty. She wanted to examine something from the late Queen's collection privately. I facilitated the necessary paperwork, as is my responsibility. Did Her Majesty specify which item she wished to examine? Dame Patricia asked carefully. Sarah nodded. The coronation dress. Queen Elizabeth's dress from 1953. Her Majesty was quite specific. She explained that she wanted to study the craftsmanship and design details privately before an upcoming engagement with textile historians. It seemed a reasonable request. The Queen Consort has genuine interests in fashion history and preservation. I saw no cause for concern. I processed the paperwork through standard channels. Margaret leaned forward slightly. Lady Sarah, the standard procedure requires documentation of what item is being accessed and where it will be temporarily relocated. There is no such documentation in the vault records. Sarah's composure faltered for the first time. I was told the consultation would occur within the vault premises itself. That was my understanding. The dress was not supposed to leave the secure storage area. I authorized access to the vault, not removal of the item. Her voice carried genuine surprise and growing concern. Dame Patricia's expression remained professionally neutral. The dress has been located in Her Majesty's private wardrobe in her personal apartments. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah's face went pale. That is not what I authorized. That is not what was requested of me. I would never approve the removal of such a significant historical artifact to private quarters, without proper documentation and security protocols. My authorization was explicitly for vault access only. Someone must have exceeded the parameters of my approval. Were you present when Her Majesty accessed the vault? James Worthington asked. Sarah shook her head. No. The Queen Consort requested privacy for her examination. That is not unusual. Members of the royal family often prefer to study historical items without staff hovering over them. I provided the authorization and trusted that proper protocol would be observed. Her voice wavered slightly. I should have been more specific in my documentation. I should have confirmed the details more carefully. This is my failure of oversight. Dame Patricia raised a hand gently. Lady Sarah, we are establishing facts, not assigning blame. Your testimony is valuable and appreciated. The question now is what transpired after you provided vault access. Who accompanied Her Majesty to the vault? Who would have physically handled the removal and transport of the dress? Sarah thought carefully. Her Majesty's personal dresser, Amanda Wilson, would be the logical person. Amanda handles all of Her Majesty's clothing, both contemporary and historical pieces for public events. She would have the knowledge and skills to handle such a delicate garment. The investigation was beginning to form a clearer picture, though many questions remained. It appeared that Queen Camilla had indeed requested access to the late Queen's coronation dress through proper channels, at least initially. But somewhere between that authorization and the dress ending up in a private wardrobe, protocol had broken down completely. Whether this represented an innocent misunderstanding, poor communication, or something more deliberate remained unclear. The truth, as often happened in such situations, likely lay somewhere in complicated middle ground. As Sarah left the office, clearly shaken by the revelation, Margaret exchanged glances with Dame Patricia. They both understood that the next conversation would be far more delicate. Speaking with Amanda Wilson, the Queen Consort's personal dresser, would provide crucial details about what had actually happened that day in the vault. But ultimately, they might need to address the situation with Queen Camilla herself. That prospect filled everyone involved with profound unease. How did one question the Queen Consort about possession of another queen's most iconic garment? The answer to that question would test diplomatic skills that even decades of palace service had not fully prepared them to deploy. Amanda Wilson had worked as a royal dresser for 15 years. Her expertise in handling delicate historical garments matched only by her absolute loyalty to those she served. When she entered Dame Patricia's office that afternoon, her professional demeanor could not quite hide the anxiety in her eyes. She had clearly anticipated this conversation. Margaret noticed how Amanda's hands twisted nervously in her lap as she settled into the chair facing the small investigative committee. Dame Patricia began gently. Miss Wilson, we understand you accompanied Queen Camilla to the Royal Collection Vault 3 weeks ago. Can you describe what occurred during that visit? Amanda took a breath before speaking. Her Majesty requested my assistance in examining the late Queen's coronation dress. She wanted to study the construction techniques and embroidery work. When we arrived at the vault, Her Majesty spent considerable time examining the dress in detail. She was very moved by it. Emotional, actually. More than I had anticipated. Margaret interrupted carefully. What happened after the examination? How did the dress come to be in Her Majesty's private apartments? Amanda's voice dropped slightly. Her Majesty asked if she could keep the dress for a few days. She wanted to continue studying it privately. She said she would return it herself within the week. I expressed concern about protocol, about proper documentation, but Her Majesty was insistent. She said as Queen Consort she had the authority. She asked me directly to help her, and I did not feel I could refuse. The room fell silent as the implications settled over everyone present. Dame Patricia's expression remained carefully controlled. Did Her Majesty explain why she wanted the dress in her private possession? Amanda hesitated, loyalty warring with honesty. Finally, she spoke. She said she felt a connection to the late Queen through the dress, that she wanted to understand what it meant to wear such a garment, to bear that responsibility. She mentioned feeling the weight of comparison, of living in the shadow of someone so beloved. The dress represented something to her, something personal and profound. Margaret felt an unexpected wave of sympathy. However irregular the situation, however improper the protocol breach, she suddenly understood the human dimension behind it. Queen Camilla had not stolen a dress out of vanity or disrespect. She had taken it because she was struggling with her own role, her own place in history, her own relationship to the institution she now served. The coronation dress represented everything Elizabeth had been, everything Camilla perhaps feared she could never be. It was not theft. It was something far more complicated and deeply personal. James Worthington asked the practical question everyone was thinking. Why did Her Majesty not simply request formal permission to borrow the dress through proper channels? Amanda's answer was quiet but revealing. I think she was afraid the request would be denied. Or worse, that it would be granted but everyone would judge her reasons. She wanted this to be private. She did not want committees and administrators analyzing her motivations. She just wanted to be alone with this piece of history, to feel some connection to the woman who wore it before her. Dame Patricia asked the question that would determine their next steps. Is Her Majesty aware that the dress has been discovered? That we are conducting this investigation? Amanda shook her head. No, I do not believe so. She asked me to return it to the vault this week. She kept it longer than intended, because she was busy with official duties and wanted time to study it properly. She has treated it with tremendous care and respect. There has been no damage, no improper handling. She genuinely reveres this garment and what it represents. The committee members exchanged glances. They had uncovered not a scandal but a deeply human story. A woman struggling with impossible expectations, seeking connection with her predecessor through a piece of fabric and thread. Yes, protocol had been violated. Yes, procedures had been ignored. But the violation came from vulnerability, not malice. From seeking understanding, not from disrespect. The question now was not about punishment or exposure, but about how to resolve this situation with compassion while still maintaining the integrity of the institutions they all served. As Amanda left, promising to say nothing to Queen Camilla until instructed otherwise, Margaret felt the weight of responsibility settle over her differently than before. She had begun this investigation expecting to uncover negligence or perhaps something worse. Instead, she had found a story of human fragility at the heart of an institution that so often demanded superhuman strength. The coronation dress had indeed been concealed in Camilla's closet, but it had been hidden there not as a trophy or a theft, but as a lifeline for a woman trying to find her place in an unforgiving spotlight of history and public judgment. Dame Patricia requested a private audience with Queen Camilla the following morning. The meeting took place in the Queen Consort's study, a comfortable room filled with books and family photographs. When Camilla entered, her expression was warm but puzzled. She had not been told the specific nature of this urgent meeting. Dame Patricia rose respectfully, her demeanor conveying both professionalism and an unusual gentleness. Your Majesty, we need to discuss a matter concerning the royal collection, specifically the late Queen's coronation dress. The color drained from Camilla's face. She sank into her chair, her composure fracturing visibly. You found it, in my wardrobe. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I meant to return it. I truly did. I just needed a little more time. Dame Patricia sat across from her, her tone carefully measured. Your Majesty, we understand the circumstances. Miss Wilson has explained what occurred. We know you intended no disrespect or impropriety. However, the protocols exist for important reasons. The dress is an irreplaceable historical artifact. Its security and preservation are paramount responsibilities. Camilla's eyes filled with tears. I know I should not have taken it. I know it was wrong, but you must understand every day I am compared to her. Every decision I make is measured against what she would have done. Every appearance, every speech, every gesture. I am constantly found wanting. I thought if I could just hold that dress, study it, understand what she felt when she wore it, perhaps I could find some connection to her legacy. Some way to honor her while also being myself. It sounds foolish now, childish even. Dame Patricia's professional reserve softened noticeably. It does not sound foolish, Your Majesty. It sounds profoundly human. Queen Elizabeth was an extraordinary woman whose reign spanned 7 decades. Following in her footsteps would challenge anyone. But you must understand that you were never meant to replace her. You are meant to serve in your own way with your own strengths and perspectives. The institution is strengthened by different approaches, not by attempting to replicate what came before. The dress cannot give you that understanding. Only time and confidence in your own value can. Camilla wiped her eyes, attempting to regain composure. What happens now? Will this become public? Will I be seen as someone who disrespected her memory? Dame Patricia shook her head firmly. The investigation team has agreed that this matter should be handled internally with utmost discretion. The dress will be returned to the vault today with full documentation of its temporary location for archival accuracy. No external parties need to know the circumstances. However, Your Majesty, in future, if you wish to study historical items, please go through proper channels. We can arrange private viewings with complete confidentiality. The Queen Consort nodded gratefully. Thank you. Truly. I have been so afraid of making mistakes, of dishonoring her memory or disappointing people. That fear drove me to act improperly. I see that now. Dame Patricia stood, preparing to take her leave. Your Majesty, may I speak candidly? Camilla gestured for her to continue. The late Queen made many mistakes throughout her long life. She would be the first to acknowledge that. What made her great was not perfection, but dedication, resilience, and genuine care for her duty. Those qualities I see in you as well. Trust in that. Trust in yourself. Later that afternoon, Margaret Fletcher personally oversaw the dress's return to the vault. She examined every detail of the garment carefully. Amanda had been truthful. The dress showed no signs of damage or improper handling. It had been cared for with reverence and expertise. As Margaret placed it back in its climate-controlled storage box, she felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the mystery was solved, sadness for the struggles that had led to its temporary disappearance, and a renewed appreciation for the human stories behind every artifact in her care. She updated the archival records with meticulous detail, noting the dates of temporary relocation, the authorized personnel involved, and the security measures that would be strengthened to prevent future protocol breaches. But she left out the emotional context, the vulnerability and fear that had motivated the entire incident. Some stories, she reflected, belonged to history's official record. Others belonged to the hearts of those who lived them. Knowing which was which required not just professional expertise but human wisdom and compassion. In the weeks that followed, subtle changes rippled through the palace. Queen Camilla seemed more confident in her public appearances, more comfortable in her own approach to royal duties. The investigation team never spoke of their discovery beyond their small circle of trusted colleagues. The coronation dress remained safely in the vault, its brief unauthorized journey becoming one more secret among thousands held within the palace walls. And Margaret Fletcher continued her quiet work preserving history, understanding more deeply than ever that the most valuable artifacts were not just objects to be protected, but symbols of the complex, flawed, and ultimately human stories that gave them meaning.